Hey everyone, this is Jay Stein, and this is the Intelligent Investor Chart of the Week on the Everywhere YouTube channel, where we're every week going to look at a new fantasy football chart and talk about whether your favorite dynasty assets are buy, sell, or holds. And this week we're going to talk about Kyler Murray and why I think he's a big buy in dynasty fantasy football. Let's get to work. So hey again, welcome back. Thanks for joining again. My process is all about looking about KTC versus fantasy points per game, and then in particular the series we're putting up KTC charts and looking at what the past could tell us about the future KTC prices of these players. Of course, KTC is KeepTradeCut. It's a website that uses crowdsourcing by having the people that visit the site answer whether they keep, trade, or cut certain players. Then they put that into those answers into an algorithm, and they come up with values for each one of these players. It's basically a sentiment indicator. So here's a look at Kyler Murray's KTC over time. And the chart is the blue line is Kyler Murray's KTC. This is really the first instance where we've run into this problem where Kyler Murray's KTC actually goes to the very top of the chart, where he was at one point trading close to the as the most expensive player. And the way KTC works is they have an upper bound of around 10,000. So from 0 to 10,000. That's why that blue line is kind of bouncing up against the top of that chart and then coming back down. The red dashed line that sort of goes through the center, that is the average KTC over this time span for Kyler Murray. The blue dashed lines on either side of those red dashed lines, those horizontal lines, those are plus or minus one standard deviation on the series. And the red solid line, that is Kyler Murray's 150-day moving average. So it basically just smooths out that blue line, taking the average of the past 150 days. And what happens is those turn into buy and sell indicators when the blue line and the red line intersect. So at those points in times, that's when you're thinking about buy and sell points. So why am I recommending buying Kyler Murray right now? You can see he's traded at the very tippy top from a price perspective. But right now he's trading at around a 5,700 KTC, which puts him at about a QB9. And I personally think that should be way higher. And let me tell you why. First, the argument about fantasy points per game. So, a lot of my analysis is thinking about what fantasy points per games are versus and how that compares to his KTC price. So in 2019, when he was drafted, his first year, he put up 18.6 fantasy points per game, which was good enough for QB 12 on his rookie season, which is great. Awesome. Then in 2020, he put up 24.9 fantasy points per game, about 25, which made him QB 5 on the season if you make no other adjustments. Then if you look, this is all on a points per game basis. You'd be QB4 if you took out Mariota's one game, so to slash that one game, and then you'd be QB3 if you took out Dak, who only played 5 games that season. So the only people he finished behind that year were Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, and then Kyler Murray, an outstanding fantasy points per game. And that's why you're largely seeing him in that year bouncing up off the very tippy top of the KTC range. In 2021, he finished with 22.2 fantasy points per game. Again, QB5. That year, he's behind Josh Allen, Tom Brady, Justin Herbert, and Patrick Mahomes. A really, really great group of guys. Brady's in there because he put up the points there. And then in 2022, he finished the year with 18.4 fantasy points per game, which puts him good enough for QB 13. If you take out the one gamers, that's Davis Webb and Sam Howell, it moves him up to QB 11. And then I saw this on Twitter from David at Guru Fantasy World. If you exclude the injury game this season, that would have put him at a 20.69 fantasy points per game finish, which is good enough for QB5 on the season. Again, these QB5 finishes. So I think from a fantasy points per game, you're seeing him score above 20 fantasy points per game. You've done it for the last 3 seasons. And then if you add on the 18.6 fantasy points per game for his rookie season, this is elite QB fantasy production. So I think that makes a case in itself from fantasy points per game to buy Kyler Murray. Then you have the torn ACL. So he tore his ACL on Monday night Patriots game in Week 14. Schefter said that they were expecting an 8 to 9 months recovery period, with him possibly being able to ramp up during the preseason and then being ready for the regular season. But that is probably the most optimistic scenario. It's most likely that he misses some of the regular season in 2023, but this is a recommendation from a dynasty perspective. We're talking about dynasty here and not redraft, and it's okay if we miss a few games, especially if we finish strong in 2023. On the ACL tear, Kyler went from a KTC of around 6,200 KTC to 5,500 KTC pretty quickly, and then bounced back up to 5,700 KTC, which is about where we are right now. So, in a sense, the discount that you get from the ACL tear, it was already there. The discount was already there, and that you could attribute some of that to, the Arizona Cardinals season, what was going on, the head coach position for Arizona. And so like the ACL tear was just adding on to make him even cheaper, even though it bounced back a little bit. This is just like more added on to making it cheaper. So you can kind of see that in this chart. You can kind of see that little blip there at the very end of the chart where he falls very quickly in a day and then sort of bounces back up. That's sort of what I'm talking about, the ACL tear. In the grand scheme of things, that discount is not even that big compared to the fall that he's had since the 2022 season to now. The other aspect that we should talk about is what's going on with the team's head coach and the new GM. I think it's good that Murray and Arizona are sort of getting this fresh start, but there's definitely uncertainty there, and that should be reflected in his KTC price. Right now, if you go on and look at the betting odds, it's saying that the highest odds for the head coach for Arizona are guys like Dan Quinn, Brian Flores, Vance Joseph, who are all like defensive guys. So then it would come down to who they bring as the offensive coordinator to really give him some juice. But from an Intelligent Investor Series perspective, I put a buy on Kyler on September 27th, 2022. His KCC at that time was around 6,666. Not a very good sign there. Since then, his KTC has moved down to 5,723, which is where it is currently. That's minus 14% performance. So I'm down 14% so far on this trade. My target price right now for him is 7,300, which is about 28% upside from the current levels of 5,700. So from a fundamental perspective, we talk about this in this series. His current PE is KTC divided by fantasy points per game divided by 10 is around 27. His peer group, the comp group that I would comp him to, trades at around a 35, which is about a 7-turn. So his 27 is about 7-turn discount from that 35. So if I give him a peer multiple, that 35 times, and I project him at the 21 fantasy points per game, which I would say is a bit conservative given his history and where he's turned out. Like if you took the average of the past 3 years, you might be looking at a 23 or 22 or 23 fantasy points per game. It works out. If you do that equation, 35 times the 21 times the 10, you get to around a target price of around 7,300. Now, looking back at this chart, you can see the 7,300 is right around where that -1 standard deviation. In fact, that -1 standard deviation is 71.33. So I'm actually just advocating for him to get up to that -1 standard deviation, which I think is a fairly conservative price target. But where he is right now to there, that's quite a bit of KTC move, and you can really gain some value in doing that. So how do I think about, from a trading perspective, how do I get Kyler Murray on my team? Right now, what I'd give up is 1.03 for Kyler Murray. The 1.03 is the equivalent of a Bryce Young or a CJ Stroud, whoever is the leftover at that point. But those guys are basically, right now, what we're thinking about them is they have the potential to do something like what Kyler Murray has done the past 4 seasons. Kyler Murray's actually proved it over 4 seasons that he can put up elite fantasy points each and every year. So if you're selecting at 1.03 and you have the ability to go and actually grab Kyler Murray from another owner, I would definitely recommend it. Some guys that I look at trading straight up for Kyler Murray that sort of work out from a KTC perspective would be Kenneth Walker III, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Chris Olave, Tyreek Hill, Travis Etienne. Now, a lot of those don't make sense when you're thinking about the overall landscape, but people are pretty down on Kyler Murray right now. They're really down on him. And you can just go out and feel what the other dynasty managers are thinking about Kyler Murray, and what his prospects are going forward. There's lots of strategies that you could take in terms of talking down the injury and the change in quarterback, or I'm sorry, the change in head coach and GM. All things that you can think about when you're going into negotiations. If you wanted to practice some sort of that compounding thing that we've talked about over again, which is basically trading down the price curve but keeping the fantasy points per game the same, that would be like taking somebody like a Justin Herbert and selling him. He's currently trading at around 8,100. They're both projected to have around 21 fantasy points per game. And you can get Kyler Murray plus the 2023 1.05, and then you take that 1.05 and think about all the things you can do with the 1.05. And that's sort of that compounding perspective. So that's it. Thanks again so much for watching. Let me know who you want to see again next week, and please like, comment, and subscribe down below. And if you're not already, please join up into the Debbie Roy Patreon. You can find me on Twitter at _Jason Stein, and my Intelligent Investor series where I write about this stuff and other investment concepts. You can find on the Dynasty Nerds. It's free. It's no paywall. Go check it out, please. And thanks again so much for watching, and see you again next week.